Welcome to the Maintenance Mavericks Podcast, the podcast for people who want to learn all things about maintenance and reliability. I'm your host, Ryan. I'm the CEO and founder of Upkeep. Each episode, I'm going to be meeting with an expert within our maintenance community to take a deep dive into topics that help elevate the entire maintenance reliability industry. Today, I'm super excited to have Dane Boers here on the show. Dane's background is in mining and electrical utilities. He founded a company called Modla. It's a company that provides advanced analytics and knowledge capture to companies looking to streamline their entire asset management. I'm really looking forward to how you started the company and your background, Dane. Welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to learn from you.
Thanks for having me. It's good to talk to you again.
It's been a few months, but you haven't been on the podcast before, but you've done a few webinars for us and the entire community. For those of you that don't know Dane, and if you don't, now's the chance. Dane, could you share a little bit more about yourself, your background, and how you were first introduced into this wonderful field of maintenance and reliability?
So my educational background, I'm an electronics engineer with physics degree. And I started out in mining as an electrical engineer on instrumentation and sort of LV mining equipment. I soon after starting got into the control system space, like DCS and PLC sort of control. And that's where jumbled the bridge to some of the more asset management sort of centered disciplines, because in control systems and PLCs, you're always looking at control data, how long equipment's running for and that kind of thing. And it kind of led into the asset management reporting around uptime and reliability of equipment and how the assets are performing. Spent a lot of time in gold mining and copper mining, and then made the jump to oil and gas. Did that for a year and a bit, project management, then joined a reliability consultancy called ARMS. Did that for a few years and kind of got exposure to a whole bunch of different industries through that. Got to see all the different tools and software that companies are using, got to also kind of see the gaps in the processes. And from there, that's why we started Modla, is to kind of address those gaps or hurdles to getting where I think the industry should go.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that background. Such a cool story. It sounds like EE background, you've got mining, oil and gas, you worked at a consulting firm. You probably saw so much good, bad, ugly, and also great. And then it's also really awesome for us to see you take that leap into technology, start your own business. And I know that a big component of Modla is really focusing on analytics around your assets. So, you kind of alluded to this, but I would love to kind of learn the story of what the problem was that you saw that made you say, I want to start a company out of this.
It's interesting. And it's kind of actually a step back from where industry is at the moment. So I'll take you through the journey. So a lot of the companies that I've worked with over my career, they understand and get the whole idea of predictive analytics and prescriptive systems and prescriptive analytics, which is where I think the industry is heading. And they understand the benefits of it and they understand what it looks like conceptually. But there's a big problem in that if they want to get there, they have to spend a lot of time, effort, resources. The analytical process isn't super straightforward. Putting your reliability hat on and doing an RCA as to why companies can't get there easily. Of course, there's cultural elements and change management type stuff. But fundamentally, there's a foundational issue, in my opinion, with the way companies operate now that's inhibiting them from getting to this future state of prescriptive analytics. And there's a long way to go before companies get there. They need to actually back up a little bit and look at their data structures and knowledge capture, their practices and processes around that, before they can take the next step into predictive and prescriptive systems. A large part of what we're doing is just resetting that foundation around what they should capture, how they should capture it, in a way that they can use it to make those jumps into the next maturity bands, if you want to call them that.
So you and I have kind of talked about this in the past, Dane, and we kind of talked about the shiny object syndrome of, hey, we see predictive maintenance, sounds really cool, let's go do that. But then you kind of forget the fundamentals. For our listeners, what are those fundamentals that a lot of businesses are missing and why?
So it's a bit of a complicated question because every business is different. But I think the main thing holding people back is a lot of companies have documented FAMICAs and documented processes and things like that. There's two parts to it. One is documentation isn't usable in the automated, prescriptive, and predictive domain that we want to get to. You can't, like, if the answer to how do we maintain this asset is to first go and read all the literature on it before you can even make a move, it's super inefficient. It's not where we want to get to. We need to codify it some way so that we can like take learnings of others and use that off the shelf, which contains all the knowledge that would be in white papers and articles and our previous learnings. So it's about reducing the labor intensity of analytics as a start. And then the second thing is around like what they're capturing. Famicus, value modes, failure rates, tasks, what tasks impact and what they don't, and what failure modes they look for, and all that sort of stuff is really good. But there's bits missing, which is the relationships between each of those elements. We call them like causal relationships. And also the subject matter expert decision-making logic also needs to be captured. And without that, you've kind of got bits and pieces of stuff that's useful, but it still needs people to bring it together, to run analytics. And again, you're back to the like labor intensive piece that makes it not cost beneficial for a lot of companies to go down this path. So foundationally, we need a structure that can handle everything from failure modes, tasks, to failure rates, to decision-making logic all in one place. And we need to set that up first before we can jump to the next step. And one thing around that, this idea of like a common knowledge base, documents and white papers and articles and that, they're all useful, but they're not inherently usable off the shelf. One of the things we're doing is helping to establish this common knowledge base. And I think we'll talk about it a little bit later. It's establishment of a framework to capture all this stuff in a way that you can reuse it.
We've got this great end state that I think everyone agrees on. We want to move from reactive to preventative, more predictive than reactive. That's a great end state. We want to be more condition-based versus time-based. We want to do more RCMs and have the time and luxury to do that. But before we jump to that stage, we have to have the foundation and the data that supports it with the right strategy that will drive these outcomes. It sounds like the education level / the content that's out there is lacking right now-ish. And there's kind of like this gap between, again, where we want to be and where we are today. Does that sound about right, Dane?
It's pretty much bang on. And the other thing is that there is no industry accepted or common way to get from this reactive state through the maturity levels to a predictive or prescriptive end state. People will like want to take their own different paths, and they use their own different solutions and things for different parts of it and whatever. And it's just not, it's not mapped out, and it's not laid out in a way that a company can follow it easily. Like this is a prime example for technological leapfrogging. So I'm not sure if you've heard of the term before, but it's like where, you know, in third world countries, they don't use landlines. They've gone straight from nothing to like mobile phones because you can jump technology gaps. Because of the availability of technology, they can jump these kind of maturity level gaps, right? And I think it's the same to some extent with maturity of businesses, in that you should be able to go from a brand new, you know, greenfield mine or something straight to a predictive or prescriptive end state. As long as the kind of people and the culture enable it, you can put the technology and you can put the data in, and you leverage stuff from other sites or other companies' learnings and so on, and get straight to an end state that allows you to jump those like early stages of that maturity curve, that, if you know what I mean. So yeah.
I think we had a conversation about this, the technology leapfrogging. It's an interesting perspective because you're absolutely right. You can do it. It requires the right people, the right culture. Maybe just out of curiosity, I know that this is a very difficult answer to give, but generally, do you think that's possible? Do you think that's probable for a lot of our, you know, this industry, is to skip the whole figuring it out portion and go from, you know, nothing to predictive?
I don't see why not. Obviously, there's an element of people and culture and maintenance capability and that kind of thing. But if you take something simple as an example, like a pump or a valve or a motor on a brand new site that you've put in, those types of equipment have been around for ages. There's a lot of knowledge out there in the industry, and pretty much everything about it, how it performs in different operational environments, you know, how long it lasts for, all of that stuff should be pretty well defined. The fact is that, like, the company can't just take something off the shelf and plug it into their system and go. That's the issue. There's no knowledge base for them to draw from. If they want to like go and put a strategy in for a pump or a pipe, they're going to have to go and like look at white papers, ask around, go and find resources to build it. And it's like, this stuff should be pretty commonplace. You should be able to take something off the shelf, contextualize it for your business, your environment, your risks and your costs, and press a button and done. And you can even have it like update every year or 6 months or when conditions change or whatever. It shouldn't be a big issue, but it's the lack of that framework to do that.
Yeah.
And the content in a way you can use it, that's the issue.
And I'm guessing you started this entire company, Modla, to solve this problem.
Exactly. Yeah. That's our jam. That's what I'm passionate about. So
it's a really interesting discussion because I feel like on one side of it, there is a standard asset that you can reuse across multiple different businesses. And then there are like ways that it can fail. There are ways that you should run maintenance on it. There are ways to use other data points to predict, how it might perform and run and act within your business. So that's like one side of it. But then the other side of it is like, obviously every single business is unique at the same time. Yes, the equipment might be the same, but we use the same piece of equipment in different ways.
Yeah, and it's an awesome question. And this is something that when I talk about subject matter expert decision-making logic, this is exactly what I'm talking about. And I want to differentiate two parts here. One is around how the asset can differ, and then there's the business side. Okay, so how the business can differ. The first one is like how the asset can differ is things like different operational contexts, like different loads, different duties, different process mediums going through it, all of that kind of thing. There's different environments it can operate in. There's different conditions it can be in when you start to use it. There's a whole range of different variables that affect the asset itself. And then there's a whole different range of variables that affect the business, which is like, cost of downtime, cost of like labor, parts, materials, all of that kind of stuff factors into what's best for the business. But the knowledge around the asset and what affects it can be standardized and codified. If you know that operating in an aggressive corrosive environment halves the life or reduces the life or performance by X, that's what like a site reliability engineer or someone will tell you. We need to take that knowledge and learning and codify it and share it so that other people can contribute and say, I've got data that says it changes it to 40% of the life, not 50% of the life, and build on that, right? And then in terms of applying it to the business, usually this is just like a cost benefit for the business approach. And this is where the analytics fits in. It's like, okay, I understand my asset. And now, given that it costs me all these different things, the different amounts for different tasks and stuff, what's the best strategy to use on that asset, given those costs and its condition and so on? And that's just like a mathematical process to figure out what you should do. It's nothing to do with the asset itself. It's like a business process method. And again, that's something you can automate as well.
This is a super interesting conversation, Dane, because I think what's happening is every single business is running these RCAs essentially on your equipment in different silos, right? And everyone's kind of doing it themselves. And my guess is it's an IP issue. And so the question becomes like, well, who should own the IP? Is it the business? Why would they want to share this information with potentially their competitors? Is it the manufacturer? Or is it like a technology provider that can take all of this, anonymize it, and then draw bigger conclusions based off of big data sets?
Yeah, so this is like one of the barriers to sharing information. There's a lot of companies focus on their IP and say, this is mine, I don't want to share it. But what we try to do is like separate the differences, like separate it between like business process and knowledge about an asset. And if you talk to a company and you break it down, you say, well, we're trying to get information about pipes. The SMEs that you have on site know about pipes, but so do a lot of other SMEs all around the world. What they're sharing isn't necessarily like sensitive information if they tell me about like how a pipe operates, how long it lasts for, and so on. And for a lot of asset classes, especially the common ones, there's like no need to kind of try and hide behind this like IP, this is my data type wall. I get it for really, really complex assets where companies like that they're known in industry for being like the person for XYZ furnaces or, something really specific. But they're known for that because they control all the experts in that field and no one else knows about it. And in that case, that's fine. But I think for 95% of the assets that are out there, people need to sort of check themselves and go, well, we aren't the experts in everything, and we would get more from sharing and collaborating as a better business outcome than trying to work in a silo. And that's a constant struggle.
Totally agree with that, Dane. And, I can feel and hear how passionate you are about this space. And, obviously I'm really excited to see what you're going to do for this entire industry. We have a segment, Dane, at the very end of our show. We do a quick fire set of questions where we ask you a question, you answer in 30 seconds or less. You ready to jump in?
Sure.
All right. First question, Dane. I'd love to know what technology are you most excited about that you think will leave a lasting impact on the entire industry?
I think just condition monitoring sensors, like IoT type devices that measure temperature and vibration and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of vendors out there now that are building these type of things. I think they're a really good idea if they're used correctly. I do think industry tends to overvalue what they can provide. I don't believe that they should be like a direct input to decision making around when and where you should replace things. I think you need to do a bit more due diligence than that and figure out from what this sensor is telling me, what do I think is wrong with it? And then given that, what's the best way to intervene? I'm not a big fan of the solutions that say high vibration, replace the asset, or high temperature, do this. There's a bit more detail to it than that. But I think there's reducing labor requirements and we can get more data. It's going to be a game changer once we figure out how to use them right.
Absolutely. Big opportunity still. Dane, what's your favorite memory of the biggest win you've had within this space, our industry?
It was probably really early on in my career. I worked in Papua New Guinea for a while, and there was a lot of downtime issues over there, like equipment breaking all the time, logistical issues to get spare parts and so on. One of the improvements that I made was on some of the control system timing loops and things, like startup sequences of conveyors and shutdown sequences of crushers and things like that. And yeah, it's crazy how easy some of the changes are to make in terms of sequencing startup timings. Because the high volume of breakdowns and shutdowns there, you could add up weeks and weeks of saved downtime over a year just from a few little code changes. So
sometimes the smallest little tweaks can have the biggest impacts, and I absolutely love to hear that. What about a big mistake that you've learned a lot from?
Context is king keeps coming back. And again, this is one that I learned early on in my career when I worked at a mine over in PNG. They had a really, really complex, it was a really cool piece of kit, but it was a conveyor belt that was like a pipe conveyor. I'm not sure if you've heard of those before, but they roll up into a pipe and contour to the land and then open up at the other end and dump the product out. But a company came and put that into the mine. It was an engineering marvel. The problem was that it wasn't suited to the context. The quality of maintenance of the teams over there was still lacking. Every time it broke, you needed really specialist equipment and specialist expertise there to help, which wasn't available. All the parts and stuff were really unique. And I think understanding that maybe the coolest or best solution, or not best solution, the coolest solution or most cutting edge solution isn't always the best. If you take into account the context and you can simplify things and standardize things, then having that broader business view is
absolutely
really, really beneficial.
Yeah, we see that so much, and you're absolutely right. It's very easy to over-engineer a simple problem, and it kind of goes back to almost one of your biggest wins which is just simple changes can make big impacts. Dan, I really appreciate you going through those quick fire set of questions with me. The last question I got for you is, can you share with our listeners all the different ways they can connect with you and follow you on your journey?
LinkedIn is probably one of the best ones. Find Dane Boers on LinkedIn and connect with me. I'll accept any connection. AssetWiki is another one. So we started a project called assetwiki.org. We share our projects and things on there, and we're trying to create this collaborative platform for knowledge sharing. I'm on there frequently contributing and in discussion forums and so on. So you can find me on there. I'm on the maintenance community as well. I kind of fly under the radar on there. I keep my head low and only answer questions and things when their reliability statistical questions or analytical questions come up. And the last one is you can email me at dane@modla.co.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dane, for joining us. Thank you to all of our listeners for tuning into today's episode of Maintenance Mavericks Podcast. My name is Ryan. I'm the CEO and founder of Upkeep. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm super active. As Dane mentioned, you can find me and us in the maintenance community Slack group. You can follow up from today's episode, suggest future topics, ask us any questions you've got. You can sign up at upkeep.org, and I hope to connect with all of you soon. Thanks again, Dane. Until next time.